Thought my mother would never believe this. You know, what do you do in a case like this? Do you run for the jungle? Well, our house actually didn't have a dirt floor. We had a palm floor that bounced when you walked, and then we went upriver 2 days by boat. So we took off and got over the jungle, and all of a sudden, I see the engine just stopped. Subversives actually came to our house, and I actually served them coffee, and they actually had to escape from the subversives.
Oh, wow. Today we have Becky Smith here, and she was in Colombia for, what, 39 years? So that's, I don't know, that's a long time and a lot of great stories. Oh. So Becky.
Hi, Brock.
Hey, growing up, what were you like growing up as a teenager and your early 20s? What did that look like for you?
Well, I had the desire to be a missionary ever since I was young. My parents were missionaries in Hong Kong, where I was born.
Oh, wow.
I was made in Hong Kong.
Made in Hong Kong.
And
Nice.
we had missionaries in our home growing up, and in our church they would come and speak and share. And I just had that desire, but I also loved children and wanted to be a teacher. And so I had the privilege of attending a Christian school here in Redding, California, and had missionary families right in high school with us, 2 families, one from Bolivia and one from Peru. And I had a Spanish teacher who was a missionary in Bolivia, and he was a real encouragement to me. And so when I went to college, I went to Bible college in Oregon and studied to be a teacher. And that was in my early 20s, late teens. And came back to Redding and taught school, but still with the desire of someday being able to go overseas.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, being made in Hong Kong, how long were you made over there for? Like, how long were you there?
Well, my parents were there for 4 years, so I was less than 4 when we returned to California, and I had learned Cantonese, picked it up from playing with the children, and they said I had perfect tones and would even correct my dad, but unfortunately I've forgotten Cantonese. But so I don't really remember it, but it always made an impact on my life. At one time I felt maybe the Lord would have me go to China or Asia, but I didn't end up there. I ended up in South America, but I love it.
Yeah, and so did you have any like stories growing up of like your dad or your mom or something like that that really stuck out to you?
Well, I know in Hong Kong we had thieves, and my dad chased a thief down the street and gave him a football tackle right before he entered the city. But I mean, he would tell us those kind of stories. I mean, those were kind of those aren't the norm. Those are the stories you remember.
Right? That's pretty good.
He ran track in college, and so he was a good runner, and the policemen were British and they wore heavy boots and they couldn't run very fast, so he just outrun the policemen and
oh, wow.
tackled this guy. But anyway.
At least it sounded like he had some backup.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, that's cool. So what was your story on getting over to Colombia? Like how did that develop?
Well, that's an interesting question, Brock. Well, like I told you, I had this desire to be a missionary overseas, and I loved teaching. And I was an elementary school teacher. And the same Spanish teacher who I had in high school taught on staff with me in the same school here in Redding. And he knew that I had an interest in missions. And so he really was an encouragement to me. And when he went back to the field, he wrote me a letter, a handwritten letter, like a father would to a daughter, and just saying, you know, I would really encourage you to apply. And he said we could use some teachers down here in Bolivia. Well, as it turned out, when I did apply, the position in Bolivia was taken, but they gave me about 6 other countries to choose from.
Oh, wow.
And I can't even remember all of them. I think there was at least one in Asia, but I just chose Colombia, and it wasn't a real spiritual reason. My parents had supported another missionary family in Colombia for years who work with the Guajibos,
Okay.
and I knew them, but I knew no other missionaries in Colombia. And I just said to the leadership, I said, well, I'll just choose Colombia. Do I need to make a second choice? And he says, no, we'll just send you to Colombia. So I said, so am I accepted? And he goes, twice. and and I might just back up just a little bit. One thing, the same missionary, Bob Williamson was his
Yeah.
name. He's with the Lord now, but he had a very unique ministry in Bolivia, and he was a very humble believer and just really, really godly man. And one thing that he had told me that I never have forgotten is he said, Becky, when you're choosing a mission board, you want to remember two things. One is you want to choose somebody who's like family to me, to you, and also that someone that you can be an encouragement to as well as them be an encouragement to you. And I never really forgot that. And so to me, that really helped in making the decision.
Yeah. So where did you find that you were getting encouragement and you were giving encouragement over in Colombia?
That's a good question too. Well, when I first went to Colombia, I went single,
Mm-hmm.
and I went as a teacher to teach the missionary children. I was an associate. And I remember it wasn't easy. You know, I was leaving my home, going off single overseas for the first time
How
in my
long?
life. I went for 2 school years,
Oh wow. Okay.
and I was in my 20s. And I, I remember I was very close to my family here and my church family, school family, and so it wasn't easy to leave them. But I remember getting there, and where I taught, the school base where I taught was called a finca, which means farm in Spanish, but it was just a really pretty piece of property on the foothills of the Andes Mountains with a river. And
Man, you're making me want to go.
you've been to Colombia, where we were most recently. But anyway, I remember being there, and we had a really neat pilot who was a very godly man, and we were down in the hangar where we were celebrating somebody's birthday, and a group of us were all seated around. And I had only been down there for like a month or so. And I just remember feeling, you know what? I've only been here a short time, and already these people seem like family to me. And
That's cool.
that was just really special. And there were like especially 3 families on the school base where I taught that were just like family to me. And I adopted them if they didn't, and they adopted me too, and included me in their activities and all. And I taught some of their children. So it was just, I don't know, it was just really an encouragement. We lived about an hour from town, so we had our own little church services right on base. But I remember singing in Spanish, "Great is thy faithfulness," and we would sing that in church. And it just was, I know you just don't always just go by feelings, but it was just that warm unity in the body of Christ that you get no matter where you go. And I hope I was an encouragement to them too.
Yeah. So what was it? 1983 is when you went over there?
82.
82.
But I was
So
down there in 83 till 84.
yeah. So in 1982, what was Colombia like?
Well, at that time, before that, the visa situation in Colombia was very difficult. It was hard to get a visa to get into the country as a missionary.
Okay.
And right about that time, in 82 or so, the visa situation started to open up. So with our particular mission, we had a number of missionaries come down during that time. So we were gaining more missionaries, and yeah, the visa situation was opening up. Now, after that time, the political situation in the country got worse, but that was later. But at this particular time, it was okay. It was starting to get a little, what would you say, a little scary out in the tribal locations, out in the
Okay.
remote areas. It was starting to get a little dicey.
Okay, were you out in those remote locations or
I
were
actually
you?
went to visit a couple of
Okay.
times. I did, yes.
Yeah.
And
And
and yeah, I was where there later there it wasn't safe to be.
wow. How long was that time? Like you were there and then was it like a month, a week, 3 weeks, a year, 2 years later that it really became more sketchy out in the outer skirts in the villages?
Yes, yes. I only went for a week to over Christmas to visit this missionary family that my parents knew, and they were in a very remote location. They had to fly in there, and it was a it was a cultural shock for me because I mean they lived very simply, just dirt floors, slept in hammocks, didn't even have a table.
Oh wow.
It was really it was quite the experience for my first Christmas away from home. And so I was there for about a week, and then I was in another location with some other missionaries in the jungle for 2 weeks during one summer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was later that those particular, some of their co-workers were upriver from where we were at that time, and they actually had to escape from the
Oh wow.
subversives. Yeah, and
Wow.
it was only, well, I left in '84 to come back to California, and it was the next year that we had some kidnappings. Our pilot, the one I knew, and a co-pilot and
Oh
another
wow.
missionary family were kidnapped. Yeah,
Wow.
so it was pretty dicey.
Yeah. So when you left, you're talking about 84 is when you left, so they were kidnapped in 85?
85.
Wow.
I believe it was 85.
Wow. How,
Or, see, no, 84. Yes.
yeah. So in 84, how, when you heard that those people were captured, were you back here in the States at that time?
I was in Oregon going through the training to be a permanent missionary because a lot of things happened in between. I actually met my future husband.
Oh, that's
He
cool.
was in the tribe at the time he heard about the kidnapping, so he was out in the jungle in the Amazon.
Oh, wow.
And yes, I was back home, but they were people I knew. All of the people who were kidnapped were
Wow.
friends of ours.
Wow. That must have been really hard.
It was. It's an amazing story. I probably don't have time to get into that, but if you ever want to, there's even a video out. Paul Dye, and it's called "When Things Seem Impossible,"
And
and
things seems
he
impossible.
actually escaped with the plane in the middle of the jungle. The other couple and the other pilot were held for a month, and they
Oh,
were
wow.
finally released. Unfortunately, later we had more missionaries kidnapped, and they were killed.
Wow.
We had three co-workers of ours two in Colombia and three in Panama. The ones in Panama I didn't know personally, but the ones in Colombia I did.
Was this with the same drug lord? Was it a drug lord or
Subversives.
subversives?
They were,
Okay, what's a subversive?
well, politically in Colombia went through a time where there was a lot of unrest in the country, and there was guerrilla warfare and
Okay.
going on and so forth. And a lot of those kind of people think that missionaries are rich and that they can kidnap and
Mm,
get a reward, a ransom. And so, yeah,
wow.
they were, there were some pretty tough times
I
that we,
bet.
we went through.
Yeah. So you came back into the States for how long?
I was back for 2 years, then got married and went right back to Colombia.
Wow. That's exciting. So in after when you went back to Colombia, what did that look like for you? Did you go back into the villages? Did you go into a town? Where did you go and what did you do?
Well, after I got married to Wayne, he was looking to go into to be with a certain ethnic group, and he'd already had experience getting to know their people and the language starting to.
Oh wow.
And so, but I still had to learn Spanish because when I went down the first time as an associate, I taught in English. So
Okay.
I could only play volleyball in Spanish. So, um, but so I had to do some Spanish study. So we lived in in the town of Villavicencio for the time for me to do some studying. And so Wayne continued doing some studying in Miraña, the group we were hoping to work with. And
Yeah.
we ended up going to the Amazon jungle, and
That
we
sounds
lived
cool.
there. The Indians actually made our home, and we lived there for a short time, but eventually subversives actually came to our house, and I actually served them coffee.
Oh
But that's
wow.
quite a story. But
Well,
we
one
we
we
had to
want to
leave.
hear.
Okay. Well, okay,
But
we by then we had 2 children, and I was expecting our third, and we were living in the village and in a palm house that the folks had built for us, and it was up off the ground. Wayne had done some work on it
yeah.
too, and
So how long were you in that jungle or in that village for?
not very long.
Not very long. Okay.
I would say all together, we made visits. Um, my husband had lived there for about a year before we were married or so.
Oh, okay.
I guess it was longer than that actually. But when we went back as a couple, we lived with the folks there while our house was being built and so forth, and made some trips. And then we lived there for a few months. First, we lived there, yes, for several months, and then we went into town, and I had our second child,
Oh, okay.
and then when we went back out with 2 children at a later date, we didn't have any. We lived along a river, a big river, that's a tributary to the Amazon, and we didn't have
Okay.
any people coming up and down the river for quite some time, for a couple weeks. And we'd heard rumors that there were some subversives just down the river from us, and so we were kind of nervous. And at that time we had radio communication with the outside world, but you didn't have cell phones back then or things
Right.
like
Yeah.
that. So, but through one of our ladies who worked with the ham radio, we actually, my dad gave us the verse Psalm 91, the chapter, Psalm 91.
Okay.
And so I believe I read it and just was like listening to some Christian music the night before this happened. And then we heard a boat coming up the river. And immediately we knew who that would be. And our friends right next door from the ethnic group right there, they went down to our friend went down to the river to meet these fellows who were coming up. And
Wow.
we
That's
were
brave.
right next door. And I had just been bathing the children down underneath the house and had gone up the house. And we were just like, what do you do in a case like this? Do you run for the jungle, which, is a possibility?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But in this case, Wayne just felt like we just needed to stay put. I think maybe our son had had a fever or something. Anyway, we were there at the house, and Wayne just got in his hammock. We had a palm house that you could kind of see through the cracks of the palm and so forth. And so when this fella came up on shore to our neighbor's house, and right away he asked our friend, Crispin, he asked, "Is the mister here?" And he said, "Yeah, he's over there in his house." And they had arms, but they had them hidden, and they were dressed in civilian clothes. So
Okay.
they came over to our house. They came up in our house and talked to Wayne. Excuse me, they talked to Wayne, and I was there in the kitchen. I think I had the children somewhere else, but anyway, it's very customary to offer tinto, which is a real thick kind of coffee. And so
Okay.
Wayne had this conversation with them, knowing full well who they were, and they even asked him, "Do you know who we are?" And he says, "I have a pretty good idea." "Are you scared?" And and he tried to just, the Lord, I'm sure, gave him a real calmness of
Yeah.
heart.
That's
And
cool.
so they didn't. They asked for some things. They felt like they had to have something of ours, and we had a two-way radio up on the, and you could see the antenna on the roof, you know, so Wayne's thinking, oh dear, there goes our radio. But when they saw it, they just said, oh, that's big, you know, and so
Yeah.
then they asked for a recorder, and Wayne used one for his language study, and then they see it and they say, oh, that's really big. And so Wayne's thinking, oh, there goes my recorder, but no. So finally, they asked for a compass. And I mean, what are you going to do, you know? Well, when you're done with it, can you give it back to me, you know, kind of. And so I think they just had to have something to show their control, you know.
Yeah.
Well, thankfully, they did not kidnap us, and we think the reason, other than, of course, the Lord protecting us, is that they were actually looking for recruits, you know, among the young men in our village, and they knew we were friends with them, and they were friends with us because they were our friends.
Yeah.
And so but it was a little bit, it was nervous just being there with them.
Yeah.
During that time, and just knowing they're in the village, they're around here, you know.
Right. Did you know anybody within that village or outside of the village that went to join the, what do you call them, the Vintes?
Well, we called them the guerrillas.
The guerrillas. Okay.
But they aren't the hairy kind, you know.
They didn't pound their chest?
No.
Okay, man.
Oh,
Wrong movie I watched.
Yeah, some people get them mixed up, but well, I think we may have. I'm not sure. I'd have to check with my husband on that because
Maybe I'll ask him later.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so you only had one close encounter like that?
well, they were there for a period of days, and so
Oh, wow.
when we also attended they had a big dance down in the Maloka, and
What's Maloka?
it's a great big Indian house, kind of like a big round house.
Oh, okay. Kind of like a town square or something where people gathered.
Mm-hmm. For festivals, like, they did their, what would you call them, rituals, or, you know, their festivities, I guess
Yeah,
you'd say.
I can kind of picture it.
And these fellows, at least one of them was present there, so.
Yeah. So they were there for a couple days. Afterwards, did you guys talk a lot with, or during and after, did you talk with the villagers a lot about that visit, or was it kind of like hush hush, or brushed it off, or anything like that?
I can't remember. I think Wayne probably did talk to them, and we actually, at that point, we were trying to get out of there. We had actually gotten very low on food even, and it was our time to go back to the States, and so we were wondering how we were even going to get out of there.
Oh,
And
wow.
we had to go by river, downriver, in a boat, a whole day to get a plane to get out of there.
wow.
And it was a 4-hour flight back to the city. So it was, we were just like wondering even how we were going to get out of there. And the Lord provided, and we were able to get out of there safely. But there were some tense times with
I'm
two
sure.
little ones.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that. I'm sure there was a lot of prayer. So when you went back to the States, did you feel like God used that and that experience to kind of share with other people kind of what's going on or anything like that?
Well, it really affected our future because after that, Wayne still had hopes that someday we would be able to return. Actually, that was the last trip I ever made down there.
Oh,
I
wow.
believe. Wayne was able to make a couple other ones, I guess, after that. One's with my father even.
Oh, that's
But,
cool.
well, actually, you know what? That was even before that. So there had been trouble in the area, but that's how it affected us personally. And it did make us consider, you know, what did the Lord have for us, because it actually resulted in a change of ministry
Oh, okay.
in the future. So
Yeah.
we were never able to go back there on a permanent basis again.
Did you guys really want to, or were you kind of like feeling like God really was moving you in a different direction, or?
Wayne really wanted to. He did everything he could to try to. He didn't accept the position as the mission asked us if we would be willing to accept a role in the training program as a
Oh, okay.
teacher, which that's what we've done for the last many years,
Yeah.
probably 20 or more. And
Oh, that's cool.
but he was holding out for quite a while. He did some other things because there were some more kidnappings after that, and so it did. It did. The Lord used it to change our lives. Now we didn't lose all contact with those people because they came out to the city. We had some of them lived in our home
Oh,
for
that's
a
really
while.
cool.
They
Yeah.
visited us, and we were able to have contact with them still. And
That's
then now they
awesome.
have cell phones. So, and but it did cause us to change the course of ministry.
So after you went back to the States and then went back to Colombia, what did you start doing after you went back to Colombia? Were you were able to visit or Wayne was able to visit the village a couple more times, but what were you guys mainly doing after that?
Well, the first, actually, when we went back, our youngest daughter at that point was only 6 months old. So we had three children by now.
Oh, wow.
And we couldn't go back to the village where we had lived. So we actually stayed in Bogotá, the capital, and we lived in the guest home for like 8 months, I think, kind of wondering, what are we going to do? And Wayne was able to help with some of this government work and so forth. But after living in the guest house for 8 months with other people, with three little children, Wayne finally said, you know what, we're just going to get a house, rent a house, and we'll stay put for at least a year unless the Lord shows us otherwise, because we had moved around so many times by this point. We'd
Oh,
lived in
wow.
so many houses so many times, and then when we come to the States, we're in California and Maine because he's from Maine, and so we had traveled and we just needed to stay put for a while. So we rented a house there in Bogotá for,
Mm-hmm.
we initially was thinking just a year. We ended up being in that house counting our time on furlough for 8 years, and then in
Oh,
another
wow.
house. So we kind of did various things, and we got involved with the church in the city and had Bible studies in our home. And finally, after realizing, you know what, I don't think we're going to be able to go back to the Amazon jungle again, for at least for now. So Wayne accepted the position to help out in we had a missionary training center, Bible school and training center, which because of the unrest in the country had to move from where you visited us
Mm-hmm.
to the city. So it was located in Bogotá.
Okay.
And so he started teaching there. And by then we had our fourth child, and I was a mom, homeschooling our children,
Yeah.
and we had people in our home, and like I said, we even had we had a blind language helper who was a dear friend of Wayne's who had helped him a lot in the language. He came and lived with us for 3 months,
Oh,
and
wow.
on like 3 different times during our lives. And so we had another fella came to our door and asking for, he was the fellow who met these subversives down in the jungle, and he needed a place to stay, and we were thinking, yeah, you can come for, a couple of weeks. He ended up staying for 10 months.
Oh, wow.
And at the
So you really
last,
had a full house all the time.
we did. And it wasn't always easy, especially for me with little ones. And, you think, I have to admit it wasn't, but the Lord used that in our lives too. And we had a ministry with them even when we couldn't be where they
Yeah,
lived.
I bet you guys were a real encouragement to those people too they were able to come and stay, and you're just able to kind of understand kind of what they went through, even though you didn't go through the same stuff probably, but it was somewhat similar, and you're able to probably just connect in a different way than anyone else could.
Their lives were not easy.
Yeah,
They had it tough.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually quite curious. What was the difference between raising kids in the jungle versus raising kids in Bogota? Like,
Well, I wasn't in the jungle too long with our children, and only with the first one and the first two for just a short time. And but
well,
when they're little,
when you're in the village, did you
oh
feel free to kind of just let the native people kind of come in and kind of hang out with the kids, or were you feeling comfortable and safe with those people,
yes.
or was it more like uptight? So, what was kind of like that situation, the interactions, like having a dirt floor and sleeping in hammocks and that kind of stuff?
Well, our house actually didn't have a dirt floor. We had a palm floor that bounced when you walked. That's why Andrew didn't learn to walk so soon because the floor bounced. But we had a palm roof, and we had underneath the house. Well, we had a little gas stove, so we cooked on gas. But when the gas ran out, we actually used a fire underneath the house, and cooked over a fire. But that was just a short time. But we were because Wayne had lived there prior to our marriage and having children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he had really good friends, and so they took care of us. They'd come over and visit. We'd let our kids, be with them, and they were
Yeah, that's
friends of
cool.
ours. And I know nowadays, with all that's going on, I mean, this was like 30 years ago
Mm-hmm.
almost. So, and not that the world was a lot better back then, but we just didn't have the same fears that you might have today. I know you have to be really careful, and I'm not saying I know we were just kind of naive too, but the particular friends that we had, we did trust them. They trusted us, and we, especially our neighbors right next door.
Okay.
I didn't have any real fears back then but we just didn't let of course the children were really young too, and they played with the little boy, and they had puppies they played with, and there were chickens and
Yeah.
and
Was there any like snakes, spiders, or like what kind of animals were you like, hey, this is something that is a red flag danger type of situation?
well, there are snakes in the jungle, but I can't say that I really saw that many. And yeah, there are dangerous animals, but they weren't probably right in the village, otherwise the villagers would kill them for meat. And we ate some pretty good meat too.
Nice.
So we had danta and tapir, and danta is tapir, and then we had lapa, which is delicious. It's a big rodent. It doesn't sound very
Hmm.
nice, but it actually is a clean rodent. And
Okay.
the villagers would give us some food like that. So they shared with us, and I made homemade bread in a little
Oh wow.
oven.
Yeah.
So we lived healthy. We.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's cool. So coming from that situation, coming into Bogota, what was raising kids like in Bogota?
Well, Bogota's a big city, and you do have to be careful, almost in some ways more than the jungle. Because one time I took all 4 kids to the park by myself, and one of our daughters was learning how to ride a bike, and while the other one was cheering her on, someone came and stole Amber's bike right out from under us, and we didn't even see them take it. So,
Oh wow.
and people say, why are you taking 4 kids to the park all by yourself? And it's like, well, what are you going to do? You can't keep them in the house all the time. So, but
Right.
we just lived very normal life. I mean, we homeschooled when the children got older, and my husband was involved with teaching the students in the Bible Missionary Training Center, so we'd have students in our home. On
Okay.
Fridays, we'd go to the park across the street, play volleyball with them. The kids just lived for Fridays. So the students came over and made pizza in our house. So we just lived a really normal life. I mean, our
Hmm.
kids have really good memories. We ended up buying a home there in Bogota.
Oh wow.
So we lived there another 10 years, counting the times, we were on furlough, and we actually took one trip to Ecuador for 6 months also. So, and we lived in a very remote situation there up with another ethnic group. So we just, I don't know, we just lived a normal life. We read lots of books. That's what we did lots of as a family. Wayne would, because he taught within walking distance from our house, he was home at noon, and after lunch he'd read books to the kids, and they traveled the world by reading books. And they have really special memories. We had lots of
Yeah.
people in our home. We had people for meals. We had people for Bible studies. We had students visit us, and we just had a normal life, as normal as can be.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So when you came back, when Wayne accepted the position in was it the Bible Institute or?
Actually, his area of expertise is more in the area of language and culture. So what it is our Bible Institute and missionary trainings is divided into, it's 4 years, but 2 years of Bible training,
Okay.
very intense Bible training, and then 2 years of what we call more practical, technical language study, like how do you learn the language? How do you cope in a new culture? What what mistakes would you make, and what would you try to avoid? And just some real practical things, as well as phonetics and those kind of things. So he would teach in that area.
Okay.
He has taught some Bible courses, but it was
But
mostly.
it was at a Bible Institute.
It was at a Bible Institute, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
It's specifically for Latins, but we have had occasionally a student from the States go down there too, who
Yeah.
spoke Spanish.
Okay. So on this study, is it what kind of people is it? Is it more meant for the people like more raised in the city, or is it more meant for the people coming from the villages?
Well, okay, I would say it was more meant for people who are involved with churches in the city.
Okay.
Yes, our missionaries who work in the villages with other people, they have different types of training they do with them, but you have to really know their culture to be able to include them. Now, one time when we were in Fusa, where you visited us, we had a student who was from a particular ethnic group, but he knew Spanish well enough that he was able to take the training with us.
Okay. That's
Married a
cool.
Colombian gal, and they are now missionaries with his
Wow.
particular
That's
group.
cool.
Yeah.
That must have been exciting.
Hydro is his name. Yeah, he's a really neat guy. We got to be really close to him.
Do you still have connections with them
Yes.
at all? Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So, yeah. Shoot, there's another.
I guess I didn't finish
Yeah.
that, though. The last 2 years then are more in the area of how would you go about learning a new language and culture, and they even give practical courses in training in having a family in the tribe, and how to can and your meat.
Have you been part of any of those trainings?
I was part of the one of having a family in an ethnic group. That Wayne and I co-taught it.
Yeah. What was one of the things that you thought was the most helpful part of the training for people that were going out there? Like, what were you like, hey, this is something that you have to know, or something that you're like, this is something that, like, if I would have known, like, it would have made my life so much easier in the jungle? Did you have any of those that you're like, I really want to get this across to you?
Well, that's a good question.
I bet there's so much.
Yeah. Well, maybe this doesn't come from a personal experience of mine, but I've heard it from others. When we teach the students there in the training center, they have classes in the morning, and in the afternoon they have what's called work detail. And it's just really practical things, like how do you, I mean, some of them that come from the city have never really worked with their hands much, dug with a shovel or
Even in Bogota?
even in Bogotá.
Wow.
That's kind of for the lower class.
Hmm.
And so they have to weed whack and mow lawns, and some of them learn how to weld or work on cars or carpentry work, maintenance. For one thing, it helps keep our costs lower. We have very minimal costs. The missionaries don't get paid a salary. So it keeps the cost down. But more than that, they just learn all kinds of practical things. And I have heard that the ones who've gone on to be missionaries later on, they have said they are so thankful for that training they had in work detail, because it just helped them so much when they were out there and they didn't have someone to go to. You learn some things about working with solar energy, and you learn things about just building your own house even, and
Yeah.
so those kind of things were really, really good. And they said, boy, we're so glad that their work detail leader, he's a Dutchman, Hadi.
Okay.
We're so glad Hadi taught us how to do that. And even the girls, they love learning how to use the drill and,
Yeah.
just different things like that. And so it's just really good training. So they do that 3 days a week. Everyone
Okay.
participates in that, and they also learn how to cook. Some of them have just depended on a maid or their mom to cook
Oh,
all
wow.
even
Yeah.
the guys, they learn how to cook. They have to have a
Yeah,
menu.
I might need to take your
Yeah,
training.
why don't you come down? We'd love having you.
Cook over a fire in the backyard.
Well, nowadays, people usually don't have to do that. I mean, there's so many modern conveniences. Even when you live in remote situations, they have a gas stove or whatever, So it's not really as bad as you think. And I always loved to go camping when
Oh,
growing
yeah, I
up.
do
So
too.
so I yeah.
But, yeah. Is there, like, when you had, like, your hut in the village or your house, was it made out of bamboo all the way? Did it have, like, what did it look like?
Well, it really was a nice house. It was made out of palm, mostly palm.
Okay.
Very, very strong trees as the pillars or
Okay, yeah.
supports. And then the folks that helped us with our house, they actually wove the roof out of palm leaves.
Oh, wow.
And they taught Wayne how to weave the roofs. But I
That's
mean, it's a
cool.
lot of work.
Oh, I
And
bet.
then because Wayne was a carpenter too, he did some things like he did the stairs and put shutters on the windows, because we didn't have screens. We may have had screens in one window, but the bugs would just come in. We had cockroaches and, excuse me. And so basically the whole house, even the floor, it was very interesting, the floor, because what they do is they take a certain type of palm, and they know all the palms, there's all kinds of palm trees, and it has a pithy center. And so they crack it open along the log, you'd say, open it up so that it lies flat, and scoop out all that soft tissue that's in the middle of the tree. And it
Okay.
leaves you with the hard outer shell. The
Yeah.
tree, you flatten it and put it together, and there's your floorboards.
Oh, wow. I would love to have seen that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And they
Yeah.
are just masters at what they do.
I
And
bet.
so basically our house was made out of jungle materials.
That's
We
really
put
cool.
some big tanks on the roof to collect rainwater, big
Okay,
containers. And then I had a faucet that I'd turn on, and it brought rainwater from outside. And then
Nice.
we used to use the creek to bathe in, but then Wayne installed a shower underneath our house from
Okay.
rainwater. So anyway,
That's really
with
cool.
a cement floor.
Oh, you had cement out there.
Well, we took it out in a plane, and that's another interesting story, because when Andrew was about 1 year old, I went out to the city by myself with my cousin. She'd come down to visit us from Florida. And so I was returning with just my young son, and I was expecting our second child. Anyway, we used cargo planes back then, DC-3s. They used to be
Oh,
used
okay. Yeah.
in the war. So we used these cargo planes, and they would fill them with cargo, but then they'd accept a few passengers. but don't think of, you know, a passenger train, a plane. I mean, so I was returning to the town, the frontier town where Wayne would pick me up, and then we went upriver two days by boat.
Oh, wow.
So some of our friends wanted to order stuff from us. You know, they wanted a couple radios and some watches, and then we were taking our food supplies and so forth. Well, then I had a bag of cement, you know. So I had some friends who were helping me doing the shopping, and we went to the airport, and I had my little toddler to real early in the morning and waited for, I think it was close to 6 hours, and I think we got on the plane one time, and they told us to get off and sent us home and said, no, the plane's not ready to go today. You'll have to come back tomorrow.
Okay.
So I go back to the guest house, and next morning get up early, go to the airport there in the city of Villavicencio, and finally another long wait in the heat, get on the plane. Finally, this time the plane takes off. Okay, you got this plane loaded with cargo. And there's these little tiny seats on the side that I was sitting with another lady. There was only one other lady on the flight, and then the flight crew. And so we took off and got over the jungle, and I'm looking out the window, and all of a sudden I see the engine just stopped.
Oh, wow.
Well, thankfully there was another engine. So, but now you have all this cargo, and I mean, they had cases of beer. They had a refrigerator in there, and I have my little canecas with our personal stuff and our mail and different things. Okay, so then I see these guys, you know, start hustling. Like, what are they going to have to do? They have to get rid of some of this weight in the plane.
Wow.
So they open the back door right in the middle of flight. You know, we're up in the air. They open the back door, and they just start shoving stuff out the door over the jungle. And here I am with my baby. He was sleeping the whole time. I'm expecting. Here's my diaper bag and my camera, and I see these what do you call them, barrels, canecas, plastic barrels of our stuff that my friends have just helped me purchase and all. And they just, I had to kind of turn my head because they just shove them right out the door over the jungle. And I just remember, it was like, oh dear, there goes our stuff. And then I didn't know what we were going to do. You know, are we going to land out here in the jungle, or what's going to happen? So the plane goes back. They're going back to Villavicencio, not out to the frontier town where we were headed, but going back. And when we get to the airport, you know, there's fire engines down there waiting for us.
Oh, wow.
But thankfully, you know, I'm thinking, okay, I know where I'm going if something happens to this plane, but I don't know about other people here in this plane. Well, we landed safely. Thank the Lord, we landed safely. And, you know, you're shaky by now. You know, you go, and I remember getting out of the plane, there's a little Tupperware lid rolling. That's mine, you know. And going back to the guest house, well, thankfully my friends were there, you know, and they received me, and just, it's just, you know, and you're thinking, oh dear, what? And Wayne had heard that something happened on our plane. You know, I didn't show up that day. This is the second day I haven't shown up. And he's worried about his wife and child. And,
yeah.
And they've just pitched a bunch of our stuff. You know, what did I lose? Well, I don't know everything, but so these dear missionaries took me out to dinner that night. Here I am in a restaurant eating with them, and thinking, now how am I going to replace what I've lost? You know, what did I lose? And I think one thing I know we had was a big tarp that we could cover our stuff in the boat to go upriver so it wouldn't get wet, because you get rainstorms, you know, in the jungle all the time. So they said, oh, we have one we got for camping. We'll sell it to you. You know, at least you can take a tarp back with you.
Right.
Well, here I am sitting in a restaurant, and this guy shows up. I don't know how he found me or anything. And he goes, oh, you need to be at the airport in the morning. We're not going on the same plane, but there's another plane we're going to leave in the morning. Well, I'll tell you, I was not ready to go on another plane. But the next morning, we were there and made it safely to the frontier town, and Wayne received me fine, and we had to buy a few groceries in town, but you know, the Lord protected us through that too. I don't know why, but he did, and that doesn't mean he always does that way, but in those cases I could see his faithfulness. He must have wanted me around a little longer. But anyway, those are some stories we have about those DC-3 planes were quite the adventure. I thought another time we were sitting on potatoes and onions. We didn't talk not having seatbelts. We didn't even have seats, you know. Thought my mother would never believe this, you know. But that's how we had to travel back then.
Wow. That must have been thrilling. Just the whole plane dropping out one engine and you're like, I hope the other one works.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so what would you say to other missionaries that are going out there for the first time or something like that? What would be some of the things that you would tell them to encourage them?
Well, you say it's kind of trite, trust the Lord, but I can't think of anything better. He's trustworthy. I think just getting to know God, and because he's trustworthy, I mean, no matter what happens, it's not going to turn out the way you expect anyway. But no matter what happens, kind of like Abraham, I guess you kind of go, going without knowing, you know, he went by faith and trusting that God would lead him. And he did me, you know, from my own personal experience, I went single, met my future husband down there.
Yeah.
Returned to Colombia, and we've served now for all these years. And I'm just very thankful. I just wouldn't trade it for anything, you know. And not that all the times were easy, and I sure didn't do it perfectly, but it's just worthwhile, you know. It's just worthwhile to serve the Lord, whether it's here or there, wherever it is. I mean, we just don't know what our future's going to hold, but as the song says, we know who holds the future, and
Right.
and he's trustworthy. So so we can go in confidence and enjoy the ride.
Yeah. So right now, I know you're in a little bit of a
Transition.
transition, especially with this whole COVID thing going around. But what does your life look like now?
Well, it looks very different. This last year, we had some major changes in our lives, and we felt like it was our responsibility to take care of my mother. She's 88 now, and so we actually, excuse me, have purchased a house here in Redding, and we're invited her to live with us. So our ministry is going to look different. Wayne's planning a trip to go down and teach in April, and he'll be teaching all his courses in one chunk. And whether or not I'll be able to go for even a couple weeks, we're looking at that as a possibility, just touch bases and kind of wind things up down there too. But it looks different now. I don't know how it's going to look completely, but we're still serving the Lord in whatever area he calls us to.